Hey there, this is Perch. And kind of part two to yesterday's topic around price point and the industry and all the rest. And so hopefully you liked what you heard yesterday and it at least opened some thoughts in your mind about kind of the reality around how comic prices have gotten too high and what do we do about that? And then why aren't we doing more about it? Why are so many people stuck in keeping prices, in basically accepting this situation? Why is that? And why there's a lot of myths right now around comic price points and why costs are and prices are the way they are. That if we're going to solve this, we've got to start to remove those myths. But the part two, as I talked about, is the industry dying? Because if you go on social media and you listen to people, particularly a lot of the crowd-funded group, they have a narrative that goes around the industry is completely imploding. It's about to die utterly, and it's not sustainable. There will not be another era of comics. This is the end. Very very dire. This is the end, and that's a myth too, and it's a myth. It's not correct, and it's very similar to the conversation around price point and why people throw up things that may sound, logical, may draw from some conclusions, but aren't true. So so why? Why? First of all, why do people think the industry's dying? Well, comic stores are closing at a very rapid rate. We've talked about that before. That's not good. Not good by any stretch of the imagination that brick and mortar is imploding. And a lot of shops like comic shops are now vanity shops, or that's where you have somebody with a lot of money. They're expecting not to really make money. And, if you go to any kind of big tech community, you'll find lots of shops and you look at them and you go, how is this shop staying in business? Well, it's staying in business because the spouse of the person running the shop has a high paying job and are basically subsidizing this store. It's a vanity project. And those stores don't typically last terribly long because eventually you lose interest, and when you lose interest, then there's no point to keep going. And break even or more likely money losing venture. So our comic shops, vanity shops. Well, yeah, probably they're getting there. I've said this before. There's an old expression that says, if you want to have $1 million comic shop, how do you do it? And the answer is start with $2 million, which is sad. I mean, oh, what kind of statement is that? Um, but brick and mortar in general are becoming vanity projects in a lot of cases. So that's not really an indictment around comics. It's more a reality of our current situation. The other reason people say it is, creator behavior and that there's a lot of social politics and topics in comics more than the audience wants. And, therefore that kind of translates to there's a lack of quality control where editors are letting creators just kind of spout their own beliefs and things with characters that have a long legacy, and it hurts the legacy of the character. It tarnishes the history that's been built up, and it's not productive. It's and it turns away an audience. And while there's some truth to that in the sense that, as we talked about with comics and politics and various things, you have different eras and different, where comics become a soapbox and people are kind of putting out their opinions and their views into comics. And this has always been true that you do have the voice of the creator is coming through the comic. What hasn't always been true is it's often been handled with a little bit more care. And when you're trying to shove out, 100 books a month as a publisher to just cram the shelves with stuff, then yeah, the quality, it's not all going to be Chris Claremont Dark Phoenix saga. It's gonna your quality is gonna drop. And if on top of that, as we talked about in the last video, you're also paying creators, or you don't have the money to pay the top tier creators, there's competition in other fields, then you're even more likely to get this behavior. So there is definitely a little less care there, and that's hurting. It's hurting interest in comics. Now that said, um, the last 5 years or so, even with all the dire predictions, even with the year ending down last year, The comics are still making a lot more money than they were making a decade ago. That's just, it's a true statement. It's an awkward statement, but it's a true one. And why I say it's awkward is that doesn't fit the narrative of comics are dying and everything's coming apart. There still is a lot of money in comics. The question becomes, is it healthy money? And the answer is largely no. That when I say healthy money, I mean a lot of it is propped up by events, it's propped up by variants, it's propped up by kind of reboots and relaunches, and it's propped up by a $4.99 price point, and that's not healthy for comics. It's not healthy for the industry. But none of that means that everything, the bottom is going to drop out, comics are going to implode, Marvel's going to be, ejected from Disney on a catapult, and then comics as we know them will die. There will not be a Spider-Man in 10 years. There's going to be a Spider-Man in 10 years. There's going to be a Spider-Man in 50 years. Spider-Man is a marketable, well-recognized property and brand. And over the next 50 years, there's going to be some truly awful Spider-Man stories made, and there's going to be some brilliant Spider-Man stories made. I do believe there will be a Kraven's Last Hunt quality of book with Spider-Man in it in the next 50 years. It will come out, somebody will do it, and people will love it. And I also think there will be the worst Spider-Man story, the cringiest Spider-Man story of all time will also get done during that period. I'm confident saying that because 50 years is a lot of time and a lot of things happen, and there will be good and bad creators that will come in and out for different reasons, and so it will happen. But Marvel makes money. And Marvel makes money in multiple ways. They make money directly, they make money through licensing, and they make money in an auxiliary fashion by providing IP that Disney is making insane money over. So it's not, the comics are not going to disappear. We're living in an era where you have Infinity War and Endgame making $1 billion. You have Captain Marvel passing $1 billion. And keep in mind, a lot of the people who are saying comics are about to implode were also saying that Captain Marvel was going to be a colossal bomb in the theaters. And Captain Marvel is now in the top 25 movies of all time. And part of that, not part of it, the majority of it, it's not there because, Brie Larson is the next most amazing actress in all of history. It's that way because comics are popular and the interest is there, and these characters are being monetized and spun out and are profitable. That's a fact. So it's not going to vanish. You're not going to see comics implode and the industry die and people get fired, and this kind of long firing line of Marvel creators happen when at the exact same time the movies are making more money than they've ever made. And by the way, nobody at Disney is sitting there going, man, great choice with Brie Larson. She single-handedly brought in $1 billion. Nobody is thinking that. Now they're going, hey, she didn't screw it up, and she helmed the film that made this money, and we were able to market off of her, and she had the personality in the face that for whatever reason it worked with her audience. So they're happy with her, but they know where the money is coming from. It's coming from comics. Comics as a business is not going to vanish. Comics as a business absolutely will change. Change doesn't mean death or implosion or the end of all eras. And I say that because comics have been going through change continuously for the last 100 years. And comics in the 80s, when there was the distribution crisis and Marvel bought Heroes World and Diamond was coming onto the scene, and you had the direct market kind of panic and all the rest, that was a much uglier era, a much, much uglier era. And you had returnability was off the charts high. And so these were not healthy times for comics. A lot of people lost a lot of money and did not make out well. And so, we can say, hey, comics are about to die. Hey, it's never been like this before. There are unique situations to where we are now, but comics have been worse before, like a lot worse before, and survived. And right now, the stability of comics sitting on these mega $1 billion films and these properties that are core to now the two largest entertainment vehicles in the country and in the world. Frankly, you've got Disney and you've got AT&T Time Warner, and those two are dominant. We're in for decades of them just running the table. And on a completely different topic, I don't think that's healthy at all. I think the consolidation of the entertainment industry is a bad thing for all of us, for creativity and good films and market rates and how prices are going to get jacked up and the bargaining power we're now going to see go on with streaming services and other things. This isn't good. But there is a positive, and the positive is comics have a bedrock of a foundation to grow on. And technology and publishing options and drop shipping and all kinds of different vehicles that are going to happen over the next 10 to 20 years are going to give independent creators and efforts like Miller World, like Skybound, like these are image imprints, but these are publishing vehicles for people to have and run a collection of books. And right now the Indiegogo and the crowdfunding stuff, the quote unquote Comicsgate stuff, they're the smartest thing they could do is figure out a image Skybound like vehicle to not necessarily go in there and try to recreate Diamond. That would be a bad idea. But go in and create the licensing opportunities, create the relationships with other media companies, create your bedrock. Everyone in comics should be looking at that. How do you create stability for yourself and your properties? And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you to do that more in the future. There's going to be more success for you. It's going to be easier. It's going to be a hell of a lot easier to create a publishing line of a couple books that you curate and take out to the market, whether you're using digital or you're printing or whatever else. It's a lot easier for you today than it was 20 years ago by leaps and bounds. And so every now and then when I see the creators getting kind of pissy and really, really irritated at this conversation, especially the older creators, one reason that I think, this is my own guess, that they do is that many of them lived through a pretty brutal time for getting your stuff done. And it's easier now. It's kind of like the old Gen X or baby boomers versus millennials. It's like, you guys don't know how hard it was. It was hard. So when you're coming here and you're whining about, oh man, this is tough. This is so tough, man. You don't know tough. And I do think there's a little bit of that comes into play. Yeah, it doesn't excuse bad behavior. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, is a comic industry dying? No. Do some people hope the comic industry is dying because they're irritated at some people in it? Yeah, there are. And I wish those people would just kind of move on. Do I think the future of all comics is crowdfunding and Indiegogo? No, not at all. As we've talked about before, there's several more steps of evolution that are going to happen there. And again, there's a multi-billion dollar industry in play. So that it's not like that's just going to be allowed to die. It's going to continue to evolve and change. So I mean, positive, glass half full. Comic industry is changing. It has always changed and it has always evolved, and things will get better and some things will be worse and we'll struggle through it. But take art. You will have comics in 50 years. I mean, most of us will all be dead, but the global warming, everything, the whole world will spin off into the sun. But the comic books, they'll survive somehow on the sun. All right, that ended in a weird place. Hey, subscribe, hit the button for notification if you're inclined to. Share with a friend, referrals. Get some other people over here. Let me know some topics you'd like me to talk about. And as always, thanks for listening.